Ever since this channel was created, we've been exposing locals doing the most absurd things on the internet, talking about social media personalities who somehow got exposed for preying on underage people, and covering some of the most unhinged internet drama imaginable. But the story we're covering today is far more tragic and horrifying than anything we've discussed on this channel so far. Today you'll see how the behavior we often expose here, the recklessness, the instability, and the constant of intoxicating substances can sometimes lead to absolutely irreversible consequences. Consequences like getting arrested, losing your career, or in the case of the person we're covering today, becoming the central figure in a homicide case. Meet Marianne Oliver Snow, a notable figure in the cosplay community who is known for her quirky TikTok videos. She was widely recognized within cosplay circles, with many people describing her as something of a celebrity in the Texas cosplay scene. Some even referred to her as the Regina George of the community, and many believed she was never far from drama. But what most people didn't know at the time was that Snow wasn't just at the center of petty controversies. She was also dangerously reckless. She had accumulated a long list of controversies over the years, until everything finally exploded in a way that would ultimately cost her close friend, Helen Hastings, her life. So today we're diving into the story of TikTok's most notorious cosplayer, Snow the Salt Queen. Snow, or Marianne Oliver Snow, was a 28-year-old social media influencer who commanded quite a bit of popularity in the cosplay scene back in 2020. She was born on September 21st, 1998 in Houston, Texas. We're not exactly sure when she started her social media career, but like many creators of her generation, she first appeared on platforms like Vine and Musical.ly before eventually making her way to TikTok. Back then, she posted silly dance routines and trend-based content, but more importantly, she was also heavily involved in the cosplay community. As a result, much of her content revolved around dressing up as popular anime characters. When Musical.ly merged with TikTok in 2018, Snow joined the platform and quickly found success. According to Famous Birthdays, she managed to surpass 1 million followers within just a year. Her content continued to focus on cosplay. She became particularly known for portraying characters such as Junkie Enoshima from Danganronpa and Ayano Eishi from Yandere Simulator. And this is where things get a little interesting. Snow also went by the online name Yandere Freak. For those unfamiliar with the term, a yandere is a character archetype that originated in Japanese anime and manga. These characters often appear sweet, innocent, and affectionate on the surface, but underneath that exterior lies an unhealthy obsession with their love interest. Anyone who gets in the way of that obsession often becomes the target of manipulation or even violence. So those are the kinds of characters Snow gravitated toward while cosplaying. But she also had a much lighter and more playful side online. Do you guys remember the song Meme Machine? It came out around 2016 and became a massive internet meme. Even Jimmy Fallon ended up featuring it on his show.
This next song is from an artist called Pink Guy. Love the cover, love the name. Maybe I'll love the music. Let's take a listen to Meme Machine.
Meme Machine.
Meme.
Wow.
Give me the memes. I need the memes. Inhale the memes, exhale the memes, inject the memes into my bloodstream.
Well, one of the trends associated with this song, exhale the meme, inhale the meme, was reportedly started by Snow. She uploaded a video using the audio, and somehow it snowballed into a viral trend.
Inhale the memes, exhale the memes, inject the memes into my bloodstream. There are good memes and there are bad memes. Why has God abandoned us? Help me.
Looking back at Snow's online presence, it's pretty clear that she built a loyal audience very quickly. At her peak, she had over 1.6 million followers on TikTok. As her popularity grew, she expanded onto other platforms as well, including Instagram, Tumblr, Patreon, and YouTube. She was also a fairly big deal within the Texas cosplay scene. Back in 2017 and 2018, that community was thriving. Massive conventions brought together thousands of fans, and well-known cosplayers could achieve a level of local celebrity status. Snow was one of those people. It was a tight-knit world built around costumes, conventions, and online followings. But like many niche communities, it was no stranger to drama and behind-the-scenes conflicts. And according to a Rolling Stone article published in 2021, Snow was often at the center of that drama. People who knew her during that period described her as someone who always gave others a reason to talk about her. Whether that attention was positive or negative, Snow rarely seemed far from controversy. As Snow's popularity continued to grow, so did the number of controversies surrounding her. And while some of these incidents may seem relatively minor compared to what would happen later, they played a major role in shaping her reputation within the cosplay community. One of the earliest controversies centered around Snow's Patreon content. For those unaware, Snow did not just create cosplay content. She also produced adult content through her Patreon. On its own, that wasn't what people had a problem with. The issue is that she would sometimes cosplay characters who were canonically underage while creating and promoting that adult content. Now, to be clear, many adults cosplay underage fictional characters. That's fairly common within the cosplay community. What critics took issue with was the combination of portraying those characters and then creating explicit content around them. Many people felt it crossed a line, and the backlash quickly spread across Tumblr and other cosplay spaces. But that wasn't the only controversy Snow found herself involved in. Around the same time, another dispute emerged involving one of her most recognizable cosplay creations, her Junko Inishima wigs. Those wigs were actually quite popular. Many people had seen Snow wearing them and wanted to know how she styled them. Eventually, Snow announced on Tumblr that she was selling custom-made versions for around $300, and that interested buyers could commission one directly from her. One of those buyers was a cosplayer and content creator named Stardeer. According to Stardeer, a friend of hers commissioned Snow to create the wig as a gift. However, the process quickly became frustrating. The wig took much longer than expected to complete, which was already a red flag for them. Eventually, Snow informed them that the wig had been shipped around Christmas time. The problem was that Stardeer happened to be away at the time. When she returned from vacation, she discovered that several packages had been stolen from her doorstep. Naturally, she assumed the wig had been among them. After hearing what happened, Snow agreed to remake the wig. However, she requested an additional $150 payment to create a second one. Stardeer's friend agreed and paid the amount. This is where things started getting a little strange. The replacement wig arrived significantly faster than the original one supposedly had. According to Stardeer, the quality of the wig also failed to justify the amount of money that had been spent on it.
Get stolen or something crazy. I was waiting for the shipment and apparently it hadn't gotten shipped out yet. And we were like, okay, what's happening? Like, it's been 2 or 3 weeks and it was supposed to be shipped out already. Hasn't been shipped out. And eventually I had to leave for my family. I was hoping the wig would get there before I left. And I had to leave. So I left. And 2 weeks later, or a week later, I came back home. And my dad had actually gotten a bunch of presents delivered to my apartment for Christmas, and they were all stolen. And I was super bummed because I was like, oh no, the Junko wig must have gotten here too, and it must be gone. And I wrote a letter and I put it on my door, and I was like, please, if you're the thief, like, just put the wig back, please. Like, I don't care about anything else. You can take all the whatever else. I don't even know what got shipped because I don't know what I got for Christmas because it all got stolen. But I was like, oh, like, please just bring the wig back. And so my friend sends a message to Snow and goes, oh, what's up with the wig? And she's like, oh, I'm gonna ship it out. Or let me just reference, I don't want to, this is my memory. And that's when a bunch of your packages were stolen. I told her that, and she said she could remake the wig at the cost of the 5 wigs, which was around $135. I don't really remember. But this is the strange part. It was strange because between the time the wig arrived and we reported it missing, we had organized a replacement. Okay, let me rewind a sec. After we told Snow, oh my god, we think the wig got stolen, she was like, oh yeah, I haven't, or what'd she say? I got this box. Before she said she sent the new wig out. But he paid for both. He paid for the $300 for the first wig and the $130 whatever, almost $500 for what was supposed to be 2 wigs, one that maybe got stolen, but also, from what it sounded like, hadn't even been shipped out yet. Which then this arrived soon after, but before the replacement wig was even, they didn't finish talking about it. I was very confused.
The biggest question people had at that point was also about shipping information. As anyone who's ever ordered something online knows, sellers typically provide tracking information. It lets the buyer know whether an item has actually shipped, where it currently is, and when it's expected to arrive. According to the people involved, no tracking number was ever provided for the original wig, and because of that, Stardeer began questioning whether the first wig had ever been shipped at all. To this day, there's no definitive answer. It's entirely possible that the original package was stolen exactly as believed, but the lack of tracking information left enough room for doubt that the controversy continued to grow. Eventually, the situation gained enough attention that several creators began discussing it publicly. Snow received considerable backlash and was forced to address the allegations. In response, she hosted a live stream explaining her side of the story. She also uploaded a tutorial demonstrating how to assemble and style her wigs after Stardeer complained that the product arrived in multiple pieces with little to no instructions on how everything was supposed to fit together.
I am very honest with my commissions. I tell you exactly what you're going to be getting, and I tell you that, I think that I tangle a lot of my wigs on purpose. And I will tell people that, and I will say, hey, in the commission, I'm going to tease it and make it look a certain way, especially for Mikon. Her hair's messy. And people will be like, yes, okay. And then I will send them the wig, and they'll be like, it's tangled. Refund. And I'll go, then send me the wig back. And they're like, no, you should just refund me. That fucking Junko wig, I offered her a refund. I asked her if she wanted one. She said no. She said she didn't want a refund, that she would keep the wig. Because she wanted me to give her a refund without sending me the wig back. I was like, I'll literally pay for shipping. Just send me the wig back. That's like $200 worth of wig. You only pay me $100 to style it. But no, she wouldn't give it back to me. So she's like, no, I'm going to keep it. And I was like, okay, well, then you keep it then. No, she wouldn't give it back to me. So she's like, no, I'm going to keep it. And I was like, okay, well, then you keep it then. Then you keep it then. And don't complain about it because I offered you a fucking refund. So let me walk you through my Junko wig real fast so that it clears everything up. So this is the listing that I buy part of the wig from. I would suggest buying at least 4 of this style here. And this is a secondary style. Buy like about 2 of these. So if you buy like 3 or 4 of one and then like 2 of the other, they are different colors, slightly different shades, but that's how I get that darker on the bottom, lighter on top look. So you are going to take your clips and you are going to strip them off of these little things, and you're going to add multiple clips on each clip, like multiple sets of hair on each clip. If you look through here, there is a very distinct line. You can see the little ties in the middle where this is 2 wigs, and some of them have 3, some of them have more than that. That's how you get the volume. And don't stick your clips on your clips. That's gonna fall off. Stick your clips and stack them up your head. Hi guys, and just for those of you who never like to believe anything that comes out of my mouth, let me show you this real fast. This is 1 clip. You can tell.
Now, if the wig controversy was the only complaint people had about Snow, then maybe you could chalk it up to a bad business transaction and move on. The problem was that people kept finding new reasons to criticize her. Around this same period, another controversy started brewing online. This time it involved a group of sick kittens. According to discussions that circulated within the community, Snow had apparently asked followers on Instagram to help pay for veterinary treatment after rescuing some sick kittens. People donated money believing it would go toward getting the animals proper care. But before long, rumors began spreading that the kittens never actually received treatment, and that Snow had pocketed the donations herself. Now, to be fair, we couldn't find screenshots directly showing people making these accusations at the time. However, multiple creators who later covered Snow referenced these allegations. But perhaps the biggest indication that these accusations were spreading is that Snow eventually responded to them herself. During a TikTok livestream, she directly addressed the claims that had been circulating online.
I swear to God, if you bring up the kittens right now, I'm gonna lose my shit. I was in and out of the animal hospital for like 2 weeks with those cats, and I did everything I could to save them, and I did manage to save one of them. So you know what? I literally caught a parasite from them. Like it was a contagious parasite to me, and I died because I was taking care of them so intensely. So you can eat my ass. I paid like $700 of my own money and only raised about $200 to like help. So much money and effort and time, and my roommate was in the hospital at the time. You have no right to go spreading that shit. I will end you.
Whether these accusations were true or completely false is difficult to determine today. But the fact that Snow felt the need to publicly defend herself suggests that enough people were talking about it for it to become a genuine controversy. And honestly, that's what made Snow such a divisive figure. It wasn't necessarily that every accusation against her was proven. It was as if drama seemed to follow her wherever she went. At this point, there was another controversy that put Snow under a lot of scrutiny. Because while the wig drama and donation allegations were mostly confined to the cosplay community, the next controversy was different. This one would end up putting Snow in front of a much larger audience, and for all the wrong reasons. In January 2019, Snow decided to do a Danganronpa cosplay photo shoot in a cemetery. Now, a cemetery photo shoot by itself would probably raise a few eyebrows. But that's not what got people upset. What got people upset was the fact that Snow was posing on gravestones. She and several friends drove to West Hill Cemetery in Sherman, Texas, where they filmed videos and took photographs for social media. The footage showed Snow sitting on gravestones, striking poses, and generally treating the cemetery like a cosplay backdrop. Predictably, the backlash was immediate. People felt she was being disrespectful toward the deceased and their families. Others pointed out that even if no mourners happened to be present at that exact moment, sitting on somebody's gravestone for TikTok content was simply not appropriate. As criticism spread, the photographer who accompanied Snow stepped in to defend the photo shoot. In a lengthy Instagram statement, he argued that the cemetery was a public location and that the group had been respectful. According to him, they avoided recently visited graves, stayed away from mourners, and were careful not to intentionally damage anything. He even added that they greeted and thanked the people buried there before leaving. For most people, however, that explanation didn't really help. But the real reason this controversy exploded wasn't the photo shoot itself, it was Snow's response. Instead of simply apologizing and moving on, she started posting comments that poured gasoline on an already raging fire. She argued that she personally wouldn't care if someone sat on her grave because she'd be dead. Then she escalated things even further by saying she wouldn't care if somebody urinated on her grave either. According to Snow, people could cremate her, dump her ashes into a sewer, and she still wouldn't mind. Her overall argument was basically that graves exist for the living, not the dead. Since nobody was actively mourning nearby, she didn't understand why everybody was so offended. Needless to say, that explanation did not go over well. Other TikTok creators started making response videos. Discussion spread across Reddit. More people discovered the controversy and the backlash only grew stronger. Snow eventually hosted a live stream where she once again defended her actions and admitted she still didn't understand why people were upset.
You'd be like, hey, do you want to go hang out in the graveyard? And you'd be like, yeah, and you'd go and you'd smoke and you'd hang out in the graveyard. And like, I've had like, there's been raves at graveyards, but apparently it's like a whole thing. Like, you're not supposed to like touch the gravestones or like do any of that. And I never even like, I didn't even like have a, like I knew that you weren't supposed to step on a grave that's recent buried. Like if the grass hasn't grown yet, you're not supposed to step on it. And I knew that. But I didn't know there were so many goddamn rules about graveyards. Like, oh my god. I literally just thought that place was pretty. That's what I get for having no brain cells. You have no brain cells, and the internet hates you. Yeah, like, I still don't understand why it's wrong, but, like, I'm not gonna do it again, you know? Like, I think that as long as you're not, like, being, like, actively, like, attacking the gravestone or, like, doing things like taking pieces of it or, like, kicking it or stuff, that, like...
Even after addressing the controversy during her live stream, the criticism refused to die down. As a result, Snow eventually posted a series of follow-up videos that were slightly more apologetic in tone. She acknowledged that people had been offended by her actions, though she still seemed unconvinced that she had actually done anything wrong.
So, to get us started, the grave situation, I am very sorry to the people who were hurt by that. It was never my intention. I honestly just thought that it was a pretty aesthetic place, and I had never even heard it before that you weren't supposed to touch gravestones. I had grown up my whole life touching them. I hadn't known that it was a bad thing to do. People educated me. I educated myself. I didn't take it very seriously at the beginning because I didn't even realize that it was something that people got upset about. But after people explained to me that it was something that was legitimate and people got upset about, I understood that. And while I don't understand the actual reason behind it. I don't understand that, like, why you would be upset because someone touches a grave. I do understand that it does make people upset, and I apologize for doing that because I never had the intention of making people upset.
Now, the most interesting part of this entire controversy was that people actually contacted West Hill Cemetery, informing them about Snow's actions. And contrary to Snow and her friends claiming that they had permission to film because it was a public place, the cemetery responded to one person via email, stating that Snow had been warned about her actions and that if she and her friends ever did something like this again, they could be prosecuted. And as a matter of fact, there was a sign at the cemetery saying that activities like Pokemon Go and similar games were not allowed on the premises. So it was ironic that Snow and her group assumed they'd be welcome to do a cosplay photo shoot there in the first place. All of this cemetery situation makes it very clear that Snow is not the kind of person who thinks about her actions in advance. We can safely assume that she was a rather reckless individual, and actually she had a reputation within the cosplay community. People claim that during conventions and gatherings, Snow used to bring real dangerous blades. She was also known to bring real hypodermic needles to conventions as part of her cosplay. Not props, but actual dangerous objects.
For taking real blades and live steel to conventions. And if you haven't gone to conventions, you cannot take real blades, even if they're dull, because that is a safety hazard. She also appeared at a convention cosplaying as Toga Himiko, but with real hypodermic needles. Girl, no!
That's just one instance of Snow being reckless and erratic. As exposed by commentary channel Neon Caffeine, Snow was also reportedly difficult toward other members of the community. She had several disagreements with friends, roommates, and even romantic partners. She was not very well liked within cosplay circles and was reportedly very rude toward people. Neon had shared in their expose video screenshots of people accusing Snow of a number of things. For context, Neon was also part of the Texas cosplay scene, so she knew most of these people, and even Snow. The first allegation that came to light against Snow involved a person named Haru. Snow was part of a larger group, and Haru, along with others named Elliot and Keith, were also part of it. However, an eventual fallout happened because of Snow's unhinged and often abusive attitude. According to the screenshots that Neon shared in her video, Snow was allegedly physically abusive toward her friends, especially Haru. She would often kick this person on the back, leaving bruises, and would excuse this behavior as part of being on her Junku-kin.
Other or just don't hang out anymore. And that's kind of what's considered the respectful, normal, mature thing to do. However, that's not the case with Snow. With both Haru and Elliot in the aforementioned Salt Squad, Snow had massive public falling outs in which they would post everything about these two people. I'm going to get into what they said about Elliot later, but we're going to talk about Haru right now. So Haru and Snow were the best of friends. They would always cosplay together. And while Haru posted a few things back and forth with Snow when this all started, Snow posted the majority of drama about their personal friendship online. The real reason that Snow and Haru aren't friends is because she abused Haru. I also used to be friends with Haru, and multiple people can confirm Haru talking about this. When Snow and Haru cosplayed together and would film TikToks where Snow would kick Haru, she would actually hurt her and blame it on Junko-Kid. Yeah, that's the same with Keith. Snow would literally hit him. One time they were Junko and Mikan. This is at a con. Haru actually had bad bruises on their back from Snow's heel once. In a hotel room, first day of con, Snow kicked Keith's ass with her heels and hit his bone. Like, she hit right at the bone. He bruised all con and he had bruises. Yeah, the fucking heels. I don't know much on that situation. I've only met Haru a couple times, but I can say that Snow kicking people in Junko cosplay for TikToks is true lol. Snow made me cry once because I was so uncomfortable in a cosplay once, so I didn't want to do a TikTok with them while I was wearing it and they got upset. What I just spoke about with Haru actually feeds into the next story.
That's definitely not the end of Snow's concerning behavior. Another of Snow's former friends, Elliot, claimed in an Instagram story that after their fallout, Snow tried to falsify a legal document and sent a fake and fabricated cease-and-desist notice. They shared an email from Snow on their Instagram along with a screenshot of the notice, showing proof that Snow had used an online template to create the notice herself. Now, within Neon's video, another of Snow's former friends named Keith was mentioned. Allegedly, Snow had accused this person of someone. During the Colossal Con event, Snow had supposedly spread these rumors, which led to people talking about Keith. Now we know these allegations were false because Keith ended up making a Google Doc explaining his side of the story. He shared screenshots of conversations with the person Snow accused him of raping, and she apparently never told Snow that she had been raped.
I'm gonna look at part of the Google Doc, at least the parts that have to do with Snow, which is a majority. And then the rest of the Google Doc I will link in the description so that you guys can read it for full, but I can tell you personally, basically, Keith is a chill person. Hey, so Snow is spreading a rumor that I raped you at Colossal Con? Did you tell them that? I didn't tell them that, holy shit. My boyfriend broke up with me last night because of it. Oh, I told him that it wasn't true, but he believes Snow more. I overdosed last night as well. I lost all of my friends and my boyfriend to Snow. I'm so sorry that happened. It's fine, I'm just suffering because of it. I'm so sorry this is all happening. Could you try explaining to Dustin that I didn't f***ing rape you? Literally so many people hate me for this big allegation. Who's Dustin? My ex. The one that broke up with me because Snow told him I raped you.
Now, Snow herself admitted that she never witnessed it. She was unconscious when the event supposedly happened, and even after not fully seeing or hearing anything from the supposed victim, she still spread the rumor, which caused Keith a lot of emotional distress. Another person Snow allegedly caused a lot of distress to is a person named Savannah. Neon shared a bunch of screenshots from Savannah explaining what it was like living with Snow. According to her account, the entire time she lived with Snow, it felt like she was in a cult or something. Snow was allegedly very verbally abusive toward her, told her to kill herself, bullied her, and much more.
And they don't deserve the slander, and they're one of the people that I feel like deserves the most vindication from Snow's harm. Savannah is an ex-roommate of Snow's and actually also a personal friend of mine who I also met at that Colossal Con that I mentioned. And this is their personal experience with living with Snow. Okay, so I lived with Snow in 2018 for about half a year, but that half a year was so bad for me in my mental state. When you live with Snow or are very close with them, it's almost as if you are in a cult and they are the leader because they are so manipulative in a way that can probably make most people do what they say. They also spoke a lot of starting a cult and doing curses with real blood and having specific rules. Very odd. But anyways, since I don't kin and I'm not insane, we started to grow apart while living together and having a lot of disagreements. Because I told Snow I didn't enjoy being around them when they were in one specific kin of theirs because they made me extremely uncomfortable. And that's when their inner hatred towards me started, because after that they started talking behind my back, telling all my friends that I'm horrible to try and get them to not talk to me but them instead. But I still lived with them, so it was very tense and I knew what they were doing, but I didn't tell them because I had nowhere else to go at the point. So every day I felt like I was being bullied so bad to the point that I got extremely suicidal, so I had a bad breakdown and I was really wanting to unalive, but Snow told me that night to do it or to find somewhere else to live. So I found somewhere else, but that night my best friend had also killed himself, and Snow also knew this guy, but I was scream crying at this point because my best friend is f***ing dead, and she just yelled at me to be quiet. At least Ricky tried to give me a hug, even though we weren't on the best of terms, but Snow put out their arm in front of him and said no. And that was the last time I spoke with Snow, but even after I was gone, Snow was still trying to ruin my life for some reason by telling people that I didn't care when my own best friend died, and that I told them not to talk to him. At the beginning it was fine, I just thought Snow was very eccentric and really loved cosplay and anime like I did, but they take both way too far and acts as if she is an anime character 24/7, shifting over 10 times a day, but most of their kins are crazy characters like Junko, Toga, Shigaraki, Bill Cipher, etc. Not one day went by when I had a stress-free evening where they weren't acting like they were insane. But obviously, since their shifts are crazy, they would talk a lot about how they wanted to kill people or taste blood or stab someone. And after hearing of what happened, that's very grim.
These accounts give us a very clear indication of what it was like living with Snow or being her friend. These stories could be exaggerated, but given what she eventually did to one of her friends, it's hard to assume all of them are false. These stories also tell us one very weird fact, that Snow was actually the kind of person who wanted to lead, or wanted people to follow her, and since she was a big figure in the cosplay world of Texas, it's very likely that people felt a desire to be associated with her, which could have led to her having influence over them, such as in the case of Helen Hastings, which we'll now talk about. Up until this point, we've talked almost exclusively about Snow, the controversies, the conflicts, and the people who claimed she made their lives miserable. But to understand what happened next, we need to talk about Helen Hastings. Helen was born in 2002 in Houston, Texas. Both of her parents, Philip and Susan, were highly accomplished geneticists at Baylor College of Medicine. Susan told Rolling Stone that she had Helen relatively late in life, when she was already in her 40s and her husband was reportedly in his 60s. Philip had been married twice before and had 4 sons from those marriages, but Helen was Susan's only child. Even though Helen loved the idea of having siblings, Susan explained that she suffered from preeclampsia during her pregnancy and didn't feel it was safe to have another child. As a result, Helen grew up as an only child in an environment filled with opportunity, education, and creativity. The 2021 Rolling Stone article described her as an exceptionally creative person. From an early age, she developed interest in travel, theater, band, and creative arts. She also traveled extensively with her parents while growing up. Through those experiences, Helen developed a deep fascination with Japanese culture. People close to her recalled that, as a child, she even dreamed of one day opening an institute for female scientists in Japan. However, Helen's childhood wasn't without challenges. According to her mother, Helen experienced significant bullying during middle school. Part of it stemmed from the fact that she was short in height. She also suffered from misophonia, a condition that causes intense emotional reactions to certain sounds, such as loud chewing, breathing, or repetitive noises. Because of this, Helen often found herself being mocked by other students. At times, she even had to eat lunch separately from her peers. Things became even more difficult during her teenage years. As Helen got older, she began identifying as pansexual and non-binary. She eventually started dating one of her same-sex friends. According to reports, that friend disclosed their relationship to other classmates, which resulted in even more bullying and unwanted attention. Yet despite all these experiences, the people who knew Helen described her as remarkably kind-hearted. She was often characterized as open-minded, loving, and deeply non-judgmental. She was the type of person who wanted to experience everything life had to offer. Even while struggling with anxiety, depression, and eating disorders, Helen remained compassionate and eager to connect with others. Eventually, she found the perfect outlet for her creativity, and that outlet was cosplay. Helen's friend Bailey was the person who first introduced her to cosplay conventions in Texas. Almost immediately, Helen fell in love with the entire scene. The costumes, the characters, the performances, the community, it all clicked for her. From that point forward, she became a regular attendee at conventions and began posting her own cosplay content online under the TikTok account Helen's Cosplay. It's important to note that while Helen's mother supported her daughter's interests, she also had concerns from the very beginning. Susan was aware that many of the people participating in the community were significantly older than Helen. Still, seeing how passionate her daughter was about cosplay, she chose to support her. At first, everything seemed to be going well. If you look back through Helen's TikTok content, it's clear that she admired Snow from very early on. Snow is 4 years older than Helen and had already established herself as a recognizable figure within the Texas cosplay community. Naturally, a younger cosplayer like Helen looked up to someone with that level of popularity and influence.
I've answered similar questions to this, but I started cosplay a little under a year ago, and the people who inspire me are people such as Tardini, Space Egbert, Haru, Snow, like those people.
So Helen continued posting videos and building her presence online, and people noticed. Many viewers pointed out that she bore a striking resemblance to Negasonic Teenage Warhead from the Deadpool films. The comparison became so common that she eventually cosplayed the character herself. Here is a picture of Helen dressed as Negasonic Teenage Warhead. Much like Snow before her, Helen's audience grew surprisingly fast. Within roughly a year of regularly posting cosplay content, she had amassed more than 120,000 followers on TikTok. She was becoming a recognizable face in the cosplay community and was slowly building a name for herself. And eventually, she met Snow. The first two crossed paths at a convention. They quickly became friends and soon started appearing in each other's TikToks and social media posts. Here's one of Helen's TikToks featuring Snow and some other members of her squad.
You make me want to throw up and shit on myself. Delete yourself from my life, you stupid bitch.
On the surface, it probably seemed like a dream come true for Helen. She had gone from admiring one of the biggest cosplay creators in Texas to becoming part of her social circle. But not everyone felt good about the friendship. According to Rolling Stone, several of Helen's friends and family members who were not involved in the cosplay scene became wary of Snow and her friend group almost immediately. They noticed things they found unusual, concerning, and in some cases, outright disturbing. One factor that stood out was the age difference. It's important to remember that Helen met Snow when she was only 15 years old. Snow, meanwhile, was already 19. Snow reportedly had her own place and was surrounded by a close-knit group of friends. many of whom frequently stayed with or lived alongside her. Bailey, who had been very close to Helen before she entered the cosplay scene, also spent time around Snow's social circle and quickly noticed things that made her uncomfortable. One of those things was Snow's fixation on the character Junko Inoshima. For context, Junko Inoshima is a major antagonist from the Danganronpa series, a character known for manipulation, violence, and murder. According to Bailey, Snow didn't simply enjoy cosplaying Junko. She appeared to strongly identify with the character on a personal level, and apparently Snow wasn't the only one. According to people who observed the group, many members of her friend circle had developed elaborate alter egos and would frequently switch between different identities and personas. Within the group, this behavior was treated as completely normal. To outsiders, however, it seemed strange. Another disturbing thing about Snow and her friends was their apparent reliance on alcohol and drugs. According to people close to the situation, the group drank heavily on a regular basis and also smoked a significant amount of marijuana. As Ellen grew closer to Snow, Susan became increasingly concerned about the influence this environment was having on her daughter. And it wasn't just the drinking and smoking that worried her. Susan also began noticing changes in Ellen's attitude and behavior. For instance, Ellen had always been a bright student with a promising future ahead of her, but after becoming deeply involved with Snow and her friend group, she suddenly wanted to drop out of high school during her senior year and work at a Goodwill store instead. According to Susan, this idea was prompted by Snow and her friends. Despite her family's concerns about Snow, Helen continued her friendship with her and even stood by her through many of her controversies. Thankfully, Helen never followed through on dropping out. She completed high school, graduated, and eventually secured admission to Oberlin College. Before leaving for college in the summer of 2020, however, Helen temporarily moved into Snow's house, where several members of Snow's friend group were also living. One detail worth noting is that the house was located in a relatively isolated suburban area away from the city. Helen primarily moved there because both her parents were at high risk of COVID. So after spending roughly 2 weeks living with Snow, Helen left for college. And for the first time in a long time, she seemed genuinely happy. She loved the campus, enjoyed the environment, and quickly made new friends. By all accounts, she was thriving. For someone who had struggled with bullying, anxiety, and finding where she belonged, college appeared to be exactly what she needed. But then the pandemic changed everything. Like countless other students across the country, Helen's college experience was abruptly interrupted. As campuses began shutting down due to government restrictions and public health concerns, she was forced to leave school and return home, or rather return to Snow's house. And everybody who knows this story can't help but wonder how different things might have been if she had never gone back, because what happened next was unimaginably tragic. On January 17th, 2021, Snow, Helen, and 5 of their friends were drinking, smoking, and consuming marijuana during the early hours of the morning. They all remembered watching Gotham on television and being heavily intoxicated, and Snow, under the influence of alcohol, decided it would be a great idea to take out her boyfriend's Glock handgun that he had left at her house. Reportedly, she had done this numerous times before. According to her friends, Snow had taken the gun out on several occasions, and they would all mess around with it before eventually putting it back in its case. Well, they did not put it back this time. One of the friends reportedly told Snow to pretend to shoot them, and Snow did. Then, according to court documents and legal findings, Helen apparently said to Snow, "Do me." Snow then placed the gun against the side of Helen's head and, believing it was unloaded, pulled the trigger. Helen collapsed and lost consciousness almost immediately. She was rushed to the hospital, where she was placed on life support. However, MRI scans reportedly showed little to no brain activity. So after spending 2 days in the hospital, she was taken off life support and declared dead. It was a tragic and horrifying incident, and we can't even begin to imagine how much pain Helen's family must have gone through. After her daughter's death, this is what Susan posted on social media. At this point, you're probably wondering what actually happened to Snow and her friends. Well, Snow was arrested. She told the police what had happened that night and admitted that everyone had been extremely intoxicated. She claimed that she genuinely believed the gun was empty because her boyfriend had previously told her there were no bullets inside it. Because of that, everyone present assumed it was safe to play with. Snow's friends also told investigators that they remembered seeing her remove the magazine from the gun at some point during the night. However, none of them knew how it ended up back inside the firearm. One possibility is that Snow unintentionally reinserted it while heavily intoxicated. Well, she was arrested after that, but was released shortly afterward on a $20,000 bond. She was also required to comply with several conditions, including random drug testing, home confinement, community service, wearing an ankle monitor, not owning any firearms, and having no contact with Helen's family. She had to comply with those conditions until the trial. Now, it was already pretty outrageous that she was released on what many people considered relatively lenient terms. But what was even more shocking was Snow's seemingly unbothered attitude afterward. People later discovered that just 3 days after the shooting, Snow had already returned to TikTok as if nothing had happened. On January 21st, she uploaded a video of herself dancing and announced that she would be taking hiatus. Just think about that for a moment. 3 days earlier, one of your closest friends had died after you pulled the trigger. Yet here you are posting dancing TikToks and casually announcing a break from social media. And what's even more shocking is that the hiatus didn't last very long. On February 10th, 2021, only a few weeks after the incident, Snow was back on TikTok, posting content in the same way she had before. She announced her return by writing, "Hiatus is over. Expect more Meekin tomorrow and please interact." What the hell? What's even more bizarre and honestly quite unsettling is that her content seemed to take on an even darker tone after the shooting. She was posting videos featuring blood-splattered backdrops, increasingly violent themes, and audio clips that referenced hiding bodies and other disturbing subjects.
Wake up, Gromit! Come on, Gromit! We've got to hide the body! There's no cheese and crackers in prison, Gromit! Now come on! Who will they believe? A man? Or...
You help me hide a body.
Huh? Darling, it's so hard to be 16 and schizo, but I know it's worth a...
Now, to be fair, Snow was already known for posting edgy, violent, and often unhinged content before the incident. But considering what had just happened, the fact that she immediately returned to making videos like this says a lot about how disconnected she appeared from the gravity of the situation. It's also important to remember that at the time, very few people actually knew how Helen had died. Only a small circle of people close to Helen and Snow knew the truth. There was no widespread reporting in the incident. Even though Oberlin College published a tribute to Helen after her death, it did not mention the circumstances surrounding it. Meanwhile, Helen's mother, Susan, was dealing with the unimaginable task of grieving her daughter, while also navigating the legal aftermath of the case. Because of that, she did not publicly reveal the true cause of Helen's death until October 2021. As a result, many people, including some of Helen's college friends, incorrectly assumed that she had taken her own life. But Snow and her immediate friend group knew exactly what had happened. And despite that, life seemed to continue as normal. Snow kept posting content. She continued attending conventions. She participated in meetups and cosplay events as if nothing significant had changed. That continued until around September 2021, when more people began catching wind of the situation. A few tabloid outlets reported that Snow had allegedly killed someone, which quickly led to people flooding her social media posts with comments expressing disgust and disbelief at how casually she seemed to be carrying on after a fatal shooting. As word spread, more of Helen's friends, and eventually the wider internet, began learning about what had actually happened. Then in October 2021, Rolling Stone published its story on Helen. And for the first time, a much larger audience became aware of the tragedy that had been quietly unfolding behind the scenes for months. This led to Snow to finally put her account on private toward the end of 2021. But as more trial details started surfacing online, the case only began to look more and more absurd. It also increasingly seemed like Snow had learned nothing, even after killing someone. As we mentioned earlier, Snow was arrested after Helen's death and released on bond. However, there were several conditions attached to that bond that she was legally required to follow, and she didn't. In fact, she violated those conditions multiple times, which led to motions being filed to revoke her bond on 2 separate occasions. A court document from August 2021 revealed that Snow had failed to report to pretrial services, failed to comply with curfew requirements, and even failed to follow the rules regarding her electronic monitoring device. According to the filing, Snow was non-compliant with her curfew on multiple occasions. The battery on her ankle monitor was also found to be dead on numerous occasions, further indicating repeated violations. Then in December 2021, another motion was filed to revoke her bond after she once again failed to comply with the conditions. As part of these conditions, she was legally required to report to pretrial services for random drug testing. However, in December 2021, she attempted to falsify a urine analysis test by providing a urine sample that came from a condom found inside her vagina. The Rolling Stone article also reported that around July 2021, Snow attended an anime Matsuri convention, and on the first night she was there, she became so heavily intoxicated that she had to be taken home by Uber. Her friend Lace later discovered that this was another violation of her bail conditions, which prohibited alcohol consumption. The most recent updates on Snow's trial came in October 2022 through Neon Caffeine, who shared additional details about the case. According to their coverage, the eventual sentencing outcome was as underwhelming as Snow's behavior had been concerning. So the conclusion many people reached was that even after committing a serious crime, Snow essentially got off incredibly easy. You would think this would be the end of the story, but it wasn't, because Snow made a return to TikTok under the username Feral Jinx in the summer of 2023. When people in the cosplay community started seeing her appear on their For You page again, the reaction was almost universally one of disgust. Many did not want her back in the space, and there was immediate backlash within the community. Despite the criticism and widespread disapproval, Snow continued posting. She did take a brief break of about 6 to 7 months after people began noticing her return, but after that, she resumed posting as if nothing had changed. Her new account eventually accumulated over 49,000 followers and continued to grow. While many people still remembered what she had done, there were also new viewers discovering her content who appeared to have no idea about her past. With that being said, there's still one part of the story left to discuss. What happened to the other friends who were present in the house that night? Well, none of them except Snow were charged. However, they were still legally bound not to publicly disclose details about the case. This brings us to Salem, another friend who was present in the house that night. They later described in whatever detail they were able to share how events unfolded, and also attempted to clarify several rumors that had circulated about the incident. Listening to this account makes one thing very clear. Everyone involved likely went through significant emotional distress after what happened. While it's understandable that authorities may have advised them to maintain a degree of silence afterward, it still does not fully explain why Snow is back on TikTok posting increasingly violent and disturbing content just days later. Yes, TikTok may have been her source of income and she may have felt pressure to return. But even then, posting content referencing violence and hiding bodies so soon after the incident crosses a very different line. Salem's account provides another perspective on the situation, but it doesn't excuse Snow's actions that night. Firearm safety is something that must be understood completely before handling a weapon in any circumstance, whether it's believed to be loaded or not, and certainly not while under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Many people later pointed out that even if the magazine had been removed from the firearm, a single round can still remain chambered. Once the slide is racked, that round can be fired if the trigger is pulled. This is what many believe likely happened in Helen's case. In any form, this was an incredibly tragic incident. What makes this whole case so unsettling isn't just the single moment that ended Helen's life, but everything surrounding it. Years of escalating behavior, blurred boundaries, substance abuse, and a complete failure to treat dangerous situations with even basic caution. It reads less like a sudden accident and more like a chain of avoidable choices that eventually reached a breaking point. At the center of it all is a reminder of how quickly online personas and real-life consequences can collide, often with irreversible outcomes. If you found this breakdown insightful, like, subscribe, and let me know what case or creator you want covered next.